What does Christmas, Jerusalem, the Great Pyramid, and Judge Rutherford all have in common? Stay tuned to find out. We'll explain it by the time we get to the end. Today we're going to discuss the Watchtower's first trumpet blast, the 1922 Cedar Point Convention, and we're going to show some rare photos of that convention as well as some film footage that was shown there that hasn't been seen in a century. And then we're going to compare what the Watchtower said about that convention then and look at what they're saying about it now. The first slide has an advertisement for this convention in the Golden Age and the New Era enterprise at the time, encouraging as many of the Bible students of the era to go to the convention because they knew it was going to be something extra special. They were selling pennants and they had special railroad trips that you could take so you could travel with your friends. The Cedar Point Convention, all the talks are actually listed out so you can actually go back and read them at your leisure. Some of the rare photos of this convention, there's a very long photo at the bottom. That's a famous photo. You could see they had outdoor meetings and they also had some indoor meetings. You'll see Jesus as the king on the general convention program. That's a reproduction, of course. That's not an original, but also the daily agenda that Rutherford had made. And there's a picture of the auditorium that was in one of the Bible student papers of the time.
Now, it's interesting to note how Jesus has been removed from the forefront. I believe he said, what was it, 1939, that they even changed the announcement from Christ's kingdom to announcing Jehovah's kingdom. So Jesus was slowly removed from a lot of their not advertisement. It went from the kingdom in the hope of mankind into Jehovah's kingdom. So it took it a step past and is removing the middle step to get there. So I found that interesting through all these pictures.
That's interesting that you said that, because their step away from Jesus and their complete focus on Jehovah. Without Jesus, without his sacrifice, what hope is there? The center photo is some of the Bible students of the time going over a cross bridge or a drawbridge. The bottom photo is one of the baptismal scenes, but you'll see that it looks like a little airplane there in the center of the photo. Two photos of Rutherford giving one of his lecture, and you'll see in the background towards the right is a film setup. I believe that footage, unless the Watchtower Society has it, that footage is lost. But there's some other film footage that we have that we're going to show of Rutherford. I don't believe that's been shown in a century. And a movie that they were making at the time, a silent film. So stay tuned. Van Amberg, and a shot of the crowd from the back of the convention. Van Amberg was one of the individuals that went to prison with Rutherford. The slide following is a shot of the meeting hall from the outside. And this is a photograph from some friends of mine. Their family members had gone to this convention, and this is from their personal collection.
Now, is this a different view of the building in slide 5?
Correct. Yeah, that's the same building, just from below. The other one looks like it's from higher up somewhere. But that's a close-up shot, and you can see people coming in and out here. On the next slide is the bread line. They had shots of that bread line in one of the Bible student papers of the time. Again, a couple photos from my friend's personal collection.
I don't think since they, back then, today, I don't think the Watchtower Society puts many of the old photographs like this in any of their newer literature.
Not very many. I did a search, and I have one on the next slide.
And considering how important they make it, you would have thought there'd be a little more,
Yeah, most of the photos are Rutherford, pretty much. But there is one photo. On the next slide, you'll see some photos of various vehicles and colporteuring. So colporteuring was like pioneering of today. It's just a different word that they used. So the center photo there is from one of the watchtowers. But in the New Era enterprise of the time are the two other photos. So the photo to the right, that looks like almost the same vehicle as the center one there, just another shot, or very similar. And then the one on the left says brother and sister Goodrich at home. They were camping out. And it mentions in one of the newspaper clips that there was Bible students camping at the time. The one to the right talks about the service day. They had a day where they actually went out and tried to give good news. The news that they were giving then was millions now living will never die. The ADV. And there's a little note in one of the papers of the time that they weren't sure what that meant. And it wasn't until Rutherford got up and unfurled the banner that they realized it was advertise the king and his kingdom. Well, here's an example of what you were talking about earlier, Paul, about Jesus, because they were advertising Jesus here and Jesus' kingdom. And in 39, they changed it to Jehovah's kingdom. In the old photo, several United States flags, both on the left and the right side, as well as in the front. You can really see the stars and stripes very, very clearly. In the recreation that they did in their history video.
And that looks like a screenshot from that.
That's a screenshot from the DVD, correct. There are no flags there. Now on the next slide is a reverse shot where it's showing Rutherford with the crowd. And I have a reverse shot. You could see the United States flags on both sides as well. But in the recreation, no flags.
On September 8th, 1922, another convention was held at Cedar Point. Here, Rutherford gave what would become perhaps his most memorable speech.
Do you believe that the King of Glory has begun his reign?
Yes!
Then back to the field. The world must know that Jehovah is God and that Jesus Christ is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This is the day of all days. Behold, the King reigns. You are his publicity agents. Therefore, advertise the King and his kingdom.
In the slide we were showing earlier, showed the film camera filming Rutherford. Now that film crew were Bible students and they had their own film corporation. They called themselves the Mena Film Corporation. And it was advertised in the Watchtower in the golden age of the time, as well as the New Era Enterprise. In 1918, they filmed a movie called Redemption. And you'll see there was a little advertisement in one of the Bible student papers of the time. They were selling shares in the film corporation, and that's one of the shares. On our next slides are some still shots of that film. The story is basically from Adam all the way up until the period they thought that millions now living would never die, and all the historical events in between that would lead up to that, including biblical history. You'll see in the upper right corner is a shot of Herod. Well, we have that film footage. It's a Christmas movie. Now, of course, I've edited this slightly. You can see Satan appearing behind King Herod here. And telling him to kill the babe being born in Bethlehem.
I would say that's the high priest.
He looks like the high priest, but
he's got the 12 jewels.
I am king,
he says.
And that's all we have access to today is just bits and pieces of.
This is the only part of the film that we have.
And when we researched this, we were trying to figure out what MENA stood for. And I still think it stands for the only thing we could come up with, Middle Eastern North Africa. Because it went from the pyramids to the Middle East and Israel and all that, because it represents no Jewish word or anything. So it would make sense that that would stand for that.
And we'll show some of that pyramid footage and Middle East footage coming shortly. The film was basically a 35 millimeter film that they cut down the middle. But in order to show the film, they had to use this special film camera that they developed. Well, because it wasn't a standard film setup, that you could buy your own camera and use films from other movie studios. This was a unique thing of its own. They pretty much lost their money on it. They couldn't sell it. It wasn't because it wasn't standard. It's like the Betamax and the HD DVD of our era, I guess you could say, or at least for those of us our age. Okay, the next slide is a shot of articles about this, and it said that they filmed in Imperial Valley, California, and how they were turning the desert into farmable land. Also, they filmed in Palestine because after this, Rutherford wrote his book, Comfort for the Jews, because they were expecting that the Jewish people would be returned as a nation. That did happen in 1948. And then in the upper right corner is a shot of Rutherford coming out of the Great Pyramid. So, let's roll the next clip. They're using a newfangled invention, the airplane. That's Rutherford going into the plane now. You can see the Temple Mount there. So this is an overview shot of Jerusalem. And there's Rutherford. He's the taller one. There he is again. They were going up onto the Temple Mount.
Yeah, it shows this gives a good indication of how firm in their belief they were about the Jews being God's chosen people and the blessings of Christ's kingdom, which they believed was the kingdom coming through down to mankind through the Jews. Now there's no mention of the Jews. You talk to Jehovah's Witnesses today, they don't realize that the Jehovah's Witnesses believed in the Jewish transition also, because some of this stuff is so long and it's changed so many times. And some of our discussions, like you said, that we have in the future will be interesting to just go over all these changes and how drastic they are compared to what they started out as.
That replacement theology is very, very interesting because you have a couple passages in Revelation, chapter 2, verse 9, and chapter 3, verse 9. The only reason I remember that is because it's a same verse number, just a chapter apart, where it says, beware of those who say they are Jews and they are not. They are the synagogue of Satan. It's a warning for those to watch out for this kind of behavior. This replacement theology only works if you only look at the good side of things. But when it's the bad side of things, they apply it to everybody else. A future discussion for another time.
Future discussion.
We'll show some of the pyramid footage. So they were making films to try to instruct the public in what they believed at the time.
Now, I find it very interesting how the Bible students had a section on the Great Pyramid that they utilized in design. And I guess it was popular for the day. Rutherford recapitalized on the Great Pyramid. Now they deny it. And some of the Jehovah's Witnesses say, oh, that was Russell, not Rutherford. Well, no, both did have pyramid prophecies and comparisons.
And here's an example of exactly what you're talking about. You can see the passageway systems there. See the date in the upper left corner?
1925, yeah.
1925.
Yeah.
This is a definite Rutherford one. And of course, there's an article in Watchtower. Rutherford admitted years later he made an ass of himself about 1925. The next film is actual film footage of Rutherford at the Great Pyramid. There's video footage here of Rutherford and his friends riding up to the Great Pyramid. They're riding up to the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid behind them. Here they are riding up to the pyramid. Shot of them climbing up. And you can tell it's pretty hot here because watch how he wipes the sweat off his brow.